Hey everyone, getting started. As you can already see, we are going to be painting this little landscape here. So it's a meadow landscape that you are going to paint using acrylic colors. So getting started, here I have a canvas board of Brewster which is 4 into 6 inches, and I'm using Brewster acrylic colors and gold Taclon brushes for this one. So starting by first mixing the cobalt blue color with a little bit of water, and I'm applying it over my canvas board on the top half using a flippered brush of the Booster Gold Taclon brushes. Layer it gently and apply it thoroughly, and try not to use too much of water, otherwise you will have a very transparent consistency, which is not something very preferable in case of acrylics. So what we are going to do is look for a thicker consistency which is more on the opaque side and can go ahead and smudge the grains on our canvas board. So I'm just adding a little bit white as I'm moving downwards to reduce the color density and making it on a lighter side and bringing it down in a gradient formation. Apply it gently and use only strokes in one single direction, which is horizontally, so that it is completely well absorbed by the canvas, as well as you don't have to be worried about this creating brush marks. So slowly adding more white as I'm moving downwards, and again blending it with the cobalt blue color as we are moving forward with this. Try to thoroughly blend the colors together so that it's seamless and doesn't appear to have a distracted kind of a tone or very rough kind of edges. Blend it smoothly as possible, and you can also use a little bit more of white color to blend it more smoothly, or a little bit of water as well around the tip of your brush so that it's more flowy and has a smooth movement around. Blend the color till the topmost portion as well, otherwise it might look very stiff on the upper end and very light on the bottom half. So blend it as smoothly as possible, creating a nice gradient from a darker version to a lighter. Now using a little bit of violetish tone with a little bit of water. In case you don't have, you can always mix a bit of crimson with blue to create the same kind of a tone, and maybe a little bit more white to create the lighter version. So adding it towards the base side of my sky that I'm considering here, and if you see, my sky is almost coming down till the bottom half, 1/3 of my paper, and again I'm using a little bit more white towards the mid area where I'm going to blend my purple color here with my cobalt blue color. Again, we are trying to go in a one single direction and blending the color as smoothly possible, and just blending it in towards the blue as well. You can also use a little bit of water so that your brush goes very seamlessly. I'm just adding a little bit more white towards the center half to blend it or to create a very nice gradient or ombre effect, and even adding a little bit more white towards the cobalt blue side, creating light wispy clouds as well. Make sure you're using very light-handedly the brush and you're not applying too much of pressure. Go for very light or minimal pressure so that you can get the wispy clouds effect as much as possible. Now switching my brush to a round brush here, which is again round brush of Booster Gold Taclon, and again I'm applying a little bit of white and adding long strokes and a little bit of broken to create the wispy clouds effect. The paint is still a little bit wet, so because of which it's blending more seamlessly and it is not very stiff clouds that we are aiming for. Again, just keeping a little bit of whitish area more towards the center to give that ombre or sunset kind of an effect, or just the sun has been set. And again for the clouds, I'm layering another layer of white on top to the areas that I've added, so that again it can be more prominent, but still I'm blending it a bit more smoothly so it's not very prominent or very has a stiff kind of edges. So keep in mind about that, and just blend in the clouds as you're going forward, and go with a very light hand again so that you don't create too much of pressure and pull out the color or your color looks very stiff. Sometimes in case it's feeling too stiff, you can use your hands to blend a little bit as well. Now that's a messy process and I'm leaving it up to you if you just want to use the brush or maybe try to get your hands messy. Okay, so we are almost done towards the cloud, but you can go ahead and add more to the areas where you desire or you feel that it's needed more, or you would like to go ahead and give it a bit more cloudy effect. If you see, so I'm just trying to use my white, very gently placing it around side my palette region so that I don't take up too much of white and add it in a very huge amount. Just a little bit and a tinge of it would be fine. Now I'm mixing black with my saprine color here. More of black, less of saprine, and I'm adding a little bit of blue as well to dilute the color or reduce the black color's intensity. And I'm going ahead and adding it to the bottom half of my paper, leaving a tinge bit of a marginal line so that it doesn't overpowers my sun area. Applying it all over to my bottom half and going very random. In this area, you don't have to go ahead and keep in mind that you should go in a single direction. You can go in any direction you want. You can just move in your brush. Make sure you're completely going for adding the color into the nooks and corners of the greens of the canvas, and you're completely making it opaque. The reason we are not so focused on going for a certain amount of direction or certain direction of our brush is that we are going to go ahead and apply multiple layers on top of this. This is acting as a base color for our meadow area or grass area, so it's absolutely fine however you like to go. But just make sure there are no greens visible or the canvas visible, and you're completely covering it out with the dark color. And make sure it's not completely black. We are keeping the green and a bluish tinge in it, so mix more of your bluish green tones so that it's not exactly a very dark color, which is again not something that we would prefer. We want a bit of natural dark green shade here. Coming down towards the bottom area, you can add a little bit more of black, keeping it in mind again a little bit of a gradient kind of an effect where the bottom half this time is more darker and the upper half is towards the lighter side. I'm applying little bit directly the black here at the extreme end of my canvas, which will just enhance the depth in my painting once I'm going ahead and adding the layers. But because of a little bit of greenish tones present in my brush, it's not very dark, so again you can keep this in mind. So these are little things that just helps you amplify your painting a lot better. Now using a round brush, I'm adding more green to my black mixture, black and green mixture that we already had, making it a little bit lighter than the one that we used. And I'm applying it over to the marginal area that we had left earlier to create a little bit of bushes which are far away in distance. So because they are against the light, they will be seemingly darker at the mid halves, which we are creating now. Not very tall bushes that we are focused on because they are very distant from our sky, so we want to keep it pretty small, keeping in mind a bit of perspective here. Again, I'm using a thin round brush to go for this, but you can use any thin round brush that you're comfortable to use to add this little bushes or bushes structure. Again, going for not so dark a mixture that we had used earlier. It's more on the greenish end, but still a dark greenish tone, not a very light tone. That is something that we are keeping in mind. The reason we are using not so dark green here in compared to the land area is because it is at a distance and we want to go ahead and make it visible in our painting that it's distant and it's not very clearly visible. Making the mid areas just a little bit darker, again to give us the sensation of it's against the light and it's more on the silhouette kind of nature. Now that we are done with the bushes, I'm just taking a little bit of lemon yellow color and I'm just going ahead and adding it to my green mixture, again making it a little bit lighter than the color that we had already used earlier. I'm just adding a tinge of water so that it's flowy enough, and again going ahead and adding that color, the lighter tone, towards the base half here on our land area, leaving the bushes. So again, I'm going in a very random motion and just going for rough kind of a texture here to give a texture of the grasses or the lands that you have seen. So keeping in mind the back layer as well as the top layer, I'm just blending it through and going in a very random manner to leave some spaces in between the black area as well as highlighting the areas that can be seen through. This time I'm using a small flat brush, but you can also use the same flippered brush or a bigger round brush or a bigger flat brush, whichever you're having available. In case you're going for a larger canvas, make sure you're using a larger brush so that it's easier for you to apply the color more seamlessly. And as you can see, again in a very random motion, making the back layer a bit see-through, but still adding the top layer, which is more lighter, so that it gives us the effects of ruggedness. Try in a bit of color variation, add more of yellow, a little bit more of green somewhere, and a little bit of the darker color in places so that there is a variety of colors present and it looks more natural. You can already see how many color variations I'm going for, adding more yellow towards the top side so that it's more lighter in comparison towards the bottom edge. So towards the mid area, I'm adding more of the yellow and again going for the same strokes of using in a very random and a rough manner to create the rugged texture, but still blending a little bit inside with the back color or the base layer so that it's not very prominent. Again, it is not stiff and it doesn't look artificial. We are trying to make it as natural as possible, so we are trying to replicate whatever is present in the nature. You can always have a reference picture by your side so that you're able to understand how the textures look. I'm blending a little bit as well with very light and minimal pressure with the tip of the brush, so that again it goes ahead and makes it look more seamlessly random. I'm still not adding the lighter color to the extreme darker end, keeping it somewhat till the 1/3 and a little bit closer to the edge, but not the extreme edge. The reason we'll come to know a little bit later, but again going for lighter colors towards the top side or the center side and darker colors towards the base half. That's what we are aiming for. This time I'm not using much of the water, I'm just going for the paints, and if it's a little bit dry, that's absolutely perfect because that will give you the effects a bit more with that dry kind of a brush stroke and it will seem more rugged and more natural. So you can go ahead and use that and try not to use water to blend it seamlessly. We don't want this here. You can keep on moving as long as you want to go ahead and add the layers and as long as you are satisfied. Here I'm almost done with this one. I'm very seemingly find it perfect and I'm going ahead and using a little bit of lighter green this time and I'm just adding it towards the edges of my bushes that we had created earlier. The reason, so there is a little bit of light emitting through, and that is something that we want to showcase as well, that this side or the back side is more darker but the edges are a bit lighter in comparison. So just adding it towards the edges only to show the difference and the highlight and the contrast against the dark and the light. Now this is something which is your painting and you have to go ahead and analyze how much light you want or how much darker shade you want. Depending on that, you can increase or decrease the light and darkness according to your desire or what your painting demands. So that is something about observation. So you can, like I said, always have a reference picture so that it's easier for you to observe and go forward with that. Or it is something that you can also go ahead with your own creativity. There is nothing absolutely to worry about. It's just a bit about light and shade that you need to play around with till and when you desire. And if you get the desired result, you can stop over there. Like I am happy over here, so I'm not adding any more lighter color towards the bushes here. Now mixing again a little bit more yellow to the already existing green mixture, as well as a tinge of white. I'm just mixing it with the complete dark green color that we had. And I'm going ahead and I'm adding strokes of line from the downward sides towards the top half, so that it looks like long elongated grasses or long elongated stems. Make sure you're mostly moving your brush from the bottom half towards the top half. The reason being that then you will have strokes which are more thicker at the bottom and thinner at the top. So that is something I would suggest you to go for. But in case you are having difficulties, you can always go for the opposite side, which is from the top to bottom. But from bottom to top will give you the nicest results. So that is what I'm going ahead and adding it to the extreme edge of the bottom half of my paper, and I'm going randomly with the strokes from the bottom side towards the top half. You can always hold your brush a little perpendicularly, and this time I'm using a very thin round brush. This is the Brewster miniature round brushes that I'm going for. In case you have any other thin round brushes that you haven't used and it's quite thin for you to give this nice thin strokes, you can make use of it. So I'm just going ahead and layering most of the lines, a few taller than the others, a few smaller, again being very random and going for different kind of variation in it, so that again it's more natural and it doesn't seems to be very systematic. So we are trying to keep the naturalness as much as possible. I'm just adding a little bit of black as well to the existing mixture so that it creates a little bit darker tones, but though it still contains the yellow and the white, it's still lighter than the base color, thus again providing us with little bit of more depth into the grasses, going for darker grasses which might be at the behind and going for lighter grasses which might be seemingly more closer to our eyes. So it gives you a nice depth in your painting as well, going for color variations which are darker as well as lighter, creating light and shade, creating the contrast and increasing the depth in the painting. Again moving for very random lines, some smaller, some taller, mostly covering the darker edge of the bottom half of the canvas that we had left, so that it can show through that it's quite dark around the edge because it consists of so many grasses, and that is hence increasing the depth or hollowness of that place. And we are trying to go ahead with a little bit more lighter shade this time, adding more of the white so that it's lighter for the extreme last layer, creating the highlights. You can also start from going ahead and starting from somewhere in the middle and creating this stroke so that they are more longer. It's not necessary you have to start from the extreme edge only. You can start a little bit above and increase it. I'm trying to going ahead and creating the strokes more longer towards certain ends and not all throughout, mostly towards the rightward side and a little bit towards the leftward side, but it's mostly focused on the rightward side so that it's a little bit more balanced and it's not exactly in the center, so that our eyes or the viewer's eyes don't stuck or get stuck in the center point. So that's something that you have to keep in mind. Keeping it on the right or the left side just makes your audience's eyes move a little bit around your painting. So try to keep your main composition or main elements towards any of the sides of the paper so that it's something that helps your viewer's eyes to move forward. And I'm just going for a bit of curved strokes as well so that it shows a few of the folded grasses and they are not quite straight. Again going for the randomness, a few small strokes just to enhance it towards the top half and create the light that they might be having or it might be showing through. Again, you can work on as many layers of colors that you want till you want to go ahead and get the desired result. I am seemingly working here in multiple layers so that it can go ahead and increase the depth in painting more, and it doesn't seem that I've just added a few brushes to cover up the bottom edge, which is the dark side of it. I'm adding a couple more the lighter grass strokes towards the extreme end or the bottom half, so that again it can add a little bit more of layering towards the edge. Again, I'm not using a very watery brush. It's more on the drier end to create the rough edges or smoother strokes, I would say. We don't want it precisely to be thin and very extremely smooth with water. Now adding a little bit of more yellow to the existing color mixture and a little bit more white as well. And using the same thin round brush, I'm going ahead and adding a few strokes of petal here and there to create some wildflowers, some a little bit bigger than the others, some a little bit more smaller, so that it looks again more random and more natural. I'm going for adding a couple of strokes, a few downwards, leftwards, and a smaller one towards the topwards, so that it's more like drooping and it's not like a straight flower or a frontal view flower that it's looking towards our side. So it's like a little bit drooping to each of the ends. Now you can again change in the directions of the droopness. If you want to go for leftward direction or the rightward direction, you might go for it. Again, keeping my composition more balanced, I'm adding the florals more towards the rightward side, but you can go either rightward side or the leftward side depending upon where you want to highlight your composition. Either it be the left side or the rightward side. But I'm still going ahead and adding a couple of flowers to the leftward side so that it's more on the balance side and it doesn't look I'm just overpowering it on the rightward side only. You can add as many as flowers as you want, but I'm just adding a couple of it. We're using that little yellow color. I'm just adding it towards the top left half as well, just a little bit, so that it looks like there are a little bit of flowers present over there as well. Smaller strokes, and I'm just blending it out a bit so that it's not very prominent. We want it like a very distant kind of a tone or texture to our land over here and not a very prominent flower, because it is not possible to be visible at that amount of distance which we are considering. So bigger flowers towards the bottom half only and not towards the top half or the center half. I'm adding a little bit more white towards that yellow mixture, and again I'm just adding few strokes on the sides of the flowers so that again I can create a little bit more depth in my flower as well, to show the darkness and the highlights or the shadows and the highlights, again making it a little bit more prominent than they already are. Also, I'm going for a lighter tone. In comparison, we have a very darker green color, so the lighter tone will contrast and make it pop up even more. You can also go for crimson shades, maybe pinkish flowers or maybe bluish flowers, whichever you would like to go for. The reason I didn't go for the bluish tone specifically, because we have a lot of amount of blue towards the sky region, which is something is fine for me. I don't want to overpower it. Again, I'm using a little bit of black with the yellow mixture, and I'm adding a little bit of dots towards the top half of the flowers to mark them as the centers. Just little dots is fine. Now you can also go for a dark brown tone here in case you don't want to go for any of this dark blackish color. Now I have added all of my center regions for my flowers. Now using the black color with mixing the yellow and white color that we already had with a little bit of green, so that it's more towards the black side, I'm adding a bit of strokes of the bushes, just like we created the bushes on the top left corner to create a silhouette of a tree here. Now again, it won't be completely visible to our eye, so it will be darker because it's against light. Again, you have to keep in mind about the light source. The light source is from the sky area. So again, if we see it from the back end, the tree or the bushes, it will always seem more towards the darker end or towards the blackish end, because of the reason that the light is coming from our opposite side. So I'm just adding it towards the top left corner, and again you can see how we are balancing out the composition. I had my flowers towards the rightward side at the bottom half, and adding the silhouette of the tree towards the top left half side again creates a bit of balance oppositely or alternatively, and thus goes ahead and makes the viewer's eyes or your audience's eyes move all around the painting from the top left corner to the bottom right corner and completely throughout your painting. So this sense of balance is also important when you're creating a composition or whenever you're creating a landscape painting or any composition painting at all. Again, I'm going for very random strokes, and this time I'm using just the bigger round brush, not the thinner one. And I'm just keeping a little bit of gaps in between, again to show that the randomness of the tree, and there is a little bit of light coming through or in between the leaves, as well as little strokes outside to show the external leaves and giving it a more natural view. Just adding smaller strokes around the edges, like I said, giving it a more natural look. I've just mixed a bit of green as well to the extreme dark mixture so that it's more greenish, and again I'm adding that greenish tones only to the edges of the tree bush that we have created and not towards the extreme corner end, keeping it mostly darker at the corner end and lighter towards the edges, just like how we did towards the bushes at the back end that we did earlier. I'm just adding a little bit of white as well as blue to it and a little bit of yellow to make it more greenish, but a bit towards the lighter side and not darker, and again adding it towards the edges, again to create a bit of light in our shaded area and to give it a light essence around the edges as well, but only around the edges, not at the center or the corner half. Again, go for very random, don't go ahead and cover up the in between gaps that you might have created. Keep that intact so that it's again very natural and it's not something that shows in you have just completely fill in the space. I'm not completely touching my bush towards my tree area towards my bush. The reason being that I don't want them overlapping with each other. I want them both prominent. So keeping it with a very narrow gap in between and not overlapping them so that they have a little amount of distance in between them. Using again the thin round brush and just the black color, I'm going ahead and drawing a couple of V shapes which are quite small for my brush, for my birds here with my thin round brush, and make sure they are very thin. Okay, they are very thin and they are very small. Again, in comparison to a flower, they can't be big. The reason being that they are again at a distance, again to create the depth in your painting. So now that we have added our birds, we have our complete landscape painting with acrylics on canvas completely ready.